Alright guys, we are here back at it. So now we have our second belly cut out from the hide, and what we're going to do is we're going to grease it down and trim it up. Now this is just going to be a short video because you guys don't really need to go through the whole process of that. The difference is this time around I've clearly made the belly strands much longer to support not only the braid of the 4.5 feet, but to also facilitate an additional 4.5 feet of loose ends to fill out that 9-foot mark that we're going to need to finish our whip. So as you can see here, again, I've got a lot of cleaning up, little messy edges there. But again, the whole emphasis of this is that we're going to go through and I'm going to facilitate the taper all the way down to what we need it to be and get it there. Now it's a little bit more difficult with the chrome split to try to give you guys like a step-by-step process on it. So this video is a little bit more meant for somebody who's familiar with whip making to a particular point. But yeah, we're just going to freehand cut these. First I'm going to grease them down real heavily, freehand cut them, and get ready to start braiding on that second belly. Alright guys, here we are again, getting ready to start the braid of our second belly. You can see here, trim the strands down and tapered them down pretty well. So now what we're going to do is, looks like the last belly that we braided, going to find this point where we want our swell to be facilitated, and that's where we want the braid to start, which looks to be about right in that area, right about there. Yeah. Let's see. Down a little bit more. It's all about getting that swell right. Oh, just a hair. Yeah. Just about like that right there. All right. We're going to lock this here into our vise. Remember, we're not going to worry about trimming that, cutting that down until after we braid this belly. Now I'm not going to braid this entire thing on camera, because you guys have already seen me do that with the first one. So kind of get a good understanding of how this stuff is going to respond. Oh, it's a little too, it's not quite right where I want it to be. I was right the first time when I first saw it. For some reason there was an optical illusion telling me otherwise. Yeah, that's good. So, just to get the braid started off of a yoke, if you're not familiar with starting a braid from a yoke, right, we have our 4 strands underneath. We're going to take the top 2, cross them over top of each other, just like that right there, lay them in nice and neat. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to do the opposite, right? So we want this left strand to go under this right strand and over top of the standing end there. And we want this one to come, and since it's going over top of the first one, we want it to go under this left strand over that one. And then we have officially started our braid. Pull that in good. And it's going to be the same exact thing. We're going to pull snugly, but we're not going to over tighten because chrome splits aren't super strong. Remember, the whole premise, all the goodies that come with using chrome split is going to completely come into play when we braid our overlay. That's where the magic's going to happen. That's where the magic's going to happen. Make sure we close any gaps. Again, I have these strands cut not as wide to cover this diameter so that I can change the angle and braid more outwardly, create more of a horizontal passing. To work on this, move this camera over a little bit. Remember, the customer wanted mildly stiffer transition, so we're going to give him that. It's clear he doesn't want the transition to become noodly, but he's also not looking for quote unquote a Jacka style binding where it's super tight all the way through. I think I have decided finally, when we get to this overlay, we're going to split those strands. This whip is going to be plenty beefy, and don't let this fool you. Don't let the thickness of this current place where we're at fool you. Remember, this stuff compresses down like nobody's business. So, even though this looks thick here, if I were to take a measurement, I would estimate that this transition right here is currently sitting somewhere around 20, between 20 and 22 millimeters. I would say probably closer to 20 millimeters. Oh, broke a strand. So we're going to show you how we're going to show you guys how we deal with that. Pulled too tight. It's a good thing for you guys to learn how to deal with. So before we plug that back in, we want to go ahead and untangle our mess here. Which I find, personally, chrome splits to be some of the greased up chrome splits tend to be some of the hardest areas to, or the hardest strands to untangle, to be honest. Can be quite the little pain in the butt. Now, breaking a strand can seem like an end game issue, right? That's it. Game's over, right? Got to start over. Got to cut a new belly. Can't do this. That's not true whatsoever. Remember, as long as we enforce the right aspects needed in a whip. For instance, you want good tension, you want good compression, it'll all work out, right? So here we have our broken strand. Now, we were able to completely finish the pass on this strand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this strand that broke off, and we're going to tuck it in way up here, where there's quite a bit of a tag. Now, yes, of course, by doing it this way, at first, we're going to have quite the lump here, because we basically have two layers here. And that seems like that's going to be a serious problem. But when we get to it, we get to the magic that'll happen here. So we're gonna follow through like we normally would. We're gonna make our next pass. Tighten this up a little bit afterwards. Same thing here. Still want to make everything nice and snug, but be mindful because since we broke that strand there, it's clear we're in a mildly weak area of the hive. So we have to be extra cautious not to create any more issues on ourselves. Okay, I'm going to keep braiding. So right now, we're getting ready to make the first pass with the strand reintroduced. Right? We're getting ready to make that first pass. We're going to be very, very gentle. You guys see that well? Turn you in here a little bit. We're going to be very, very gentle with this first pass, and we're not going to pull at all. We're not going to pull that at all. We're going to snug the other ones down around it. And we're going to keep going. Now this is that strand, so we want to keep an eye on it because it's on the next pass that we're going to work our magic in a little bit. Okay, so here we are. We're getting ready to make the second pass with that strand reintroduced. Here is the strand reintroduced. Before we make that second pass, we're going to pull this, watch it slide. And what we want to do is we want to get it to slide tucked under this strand here. So there goes the tag. Right there, just like that. Still going to pass it easy. That strand again, we're still going to pass it easy. Because remember, chrome splits are not all about how absolutely tight you can braid it, because all of the compression is going to come from the overlay. Now what we will do when we're done with this braid, because I'm going to pretty much stop about right here so that way you guys don't have to carry on. But when we come back, when I'm done with this braid and we come back to bind, because this is so close, we're just going to tie this binding and we're going to lightly bind all of this in place and bind up to about right here. So we're going to do the stiff binding down here for the transition, but we want to make sure this is good and in place. Nothing's going to move, nothing's wrong. There's no break in tension, and you can already see there's no major kink there, right? Me letting it hang down there just like that. There's no major kink. It's not super loose here, so we're good because we have a good strong core underneath that was braided well. So we just want to make sure that we come in and reinforce this with some very light, mild binding, just to make sure this doesn't go anywhere. That strand breaking doesn't bother us one bit. It's not going to cause any problems one bit. It's not going to move or go anywhere once that overlays over top of it. The key is that all the tension still remains here, and we're going to add the additional tension needed here to further support that, since we have that mild broken strand there. So that way we don't have any changes in tensions, no kinks or anything. That's the key. We want to make sure this is all smooth with no kinks. And so when all this is bound and all this is done and it's rolled, it's going to be as if it never happened. Which is, again, one of the reasons why I really like working with the chrome split, because if you had something like that happen with kipskin or kangaroo or something like that, and you broke a strand right there, which in most cases with kangaroo you probably wouldn't break a strand right there, because kangaroo is much tougher. So you wouldn't really have that problem. Kipskin, if you were doing like a kipskin whip, like this is an all kipskin whip here. This little whip here that's hanging, that's an all kipskin whip that I'm doing for myself as a experiment. I want to do a Raiders screen accurate kipskin whip. So yeah, that's exciting. And kipskin can break here. You know, kipskin's really difficult to repair a break. In most cases, I would probably splice it in. I wouldn't just reintroduce it. But with this chrome split, it's a whole different monster to work with. It's so much easier. So yeah, we're gonna stop here. I'm gonna finish braiding the rest of this, which we don't have too much longer to go. And then we're gonna come back and we're going to trim up the handle, tie that on, and then put it back in the vise and bind this in well. Make sure we reinforce this little area here where we had this broken strand, so that way there's no problems, no issues. Listen, don't let anybody fool you for one reason, for any reason whatsoever. Accidents and things like this can happen. Do not be afraid of them. Welcome them. I'll never forget the first time I was making a whip and I broke strands on the overlay. Oh my gosh. But you can do the same thing. You can reintroduce the strands right back into the overlay if you break a strand. And there's multiple ways to do it. Matter of fact, Ron Edwards in his book, How to Make Whips, covers several different ways of being able to splice strands back together, so forth and so on. I've kind of learned to more or less take the approach, if I break a strand while in the middle of braiding, I've learned to take the approach of being able to reintroduce it back in by tucking it in up here and braiding a little while. Or you know, I would probably unbraid a little while, go back up, tuck the strand back in up here somewhere, braid a little while over top of the strand, and then pull the tag in, and then that strand would actually drop into the core, and then begin braiding with the strand, and it's 100% secure. It's not ideal, but if you were to turn around and snip every single, or if you were to, can every single project just because you had a broken strand, you find yourself in trouble. When you think about whip repairs, there's whip repairs that people do where strands break. It's the same thing. The key is it must be supported. It must be dense. It must be good and hard. You don't want any breaks, any extreme difference in tensions. You don't want it to be good and tight and then all of a sudden loose there and then good and tight, because then you're going to have a kink, right? So we want to make sure that tension's good and even, and that's the reason why we're going to come back over with the binding on that, just to reinforce it. And then on top of it, we're still got another bolster, and I tie my bolsters on, so that's also going to reinforce it just as well. So yep, 100%. You won't even know that even happened. So I'll come back to you guys as soon as I'm done braiding this. Okay, just finished the braid, and I actually decided that before I do any of the binding here, before I bind on the handle, I'm going to go ahead and bind this, because once I trim down this handle and bind it on, I'm going to take it upstairs off camera and roll it. You guys don't need to see me do that, since you've already seen me do it. Roll it and make sure that this is good, in case I need to apply any additional binding to make sure that there's no kink or anything here, and that it's a smooth transition. And then plus I like to get everything good and compressed before I start compressing even more with more thread. So we're just going to bind this area. So this is where the break occurred, right? And we have a mildly loose tag here. You guys can probably see that right there. That's the loose tag end there, and it's butted up right up against the original tag end that it broke from. So now what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to start about an inch before the break, and I'm not going to bind ridiculously tight, right? The emphasis is not overdoing it. We don't want to overcompensate. We don't want to create so much tension here and then no tension here that we create a whole nother kink issue, right? We want to make sure that we resolve it all in one. So we're going to bind snugly, but we're not going to be super tight. And we're going to bind over both broken sections, and we're going to go above those broken sections an inch or so. I would say just about right there. And now we're going to go back down and we're going to crisscross it. And just snug. I'm not pulling ridiculously tight. I'm only using about the same amount of tension that I would use if I was actually tying on a bolster. Which is just I'm keeping even tension, but I'm not pulling like I'll be pulling up here. We're going to go down and we're going to stop about half an inch from the from the start point of the first pass. And we're going to go back up again, and we're going to fill in the gaps. Just like that. Same thing. And now we're actually going to pass this part where we ended and change directions. We're going to pass this part. We're going to go up a few passes in one single direction. About right there. And then we're going to tie this off with 2 instead of 3 because we don't want to leave a big hole there or anything. And we're not going to pull too tight because at the end of the day, what's going to happen is when we come back with the next phase of braiding, we're going to carry over. Okay. So the next thing is we want to trim this handle up well. Get it ready. So we're actually going to take this, pop it there for now. We're actually going to squeeze our vise right on the loose tail there, that yoke. We're going to take a look here. Take some material off. Good. Okay. Now we're going to take a little bit off the other side. Not going to take as much off on this side. First side we probably took 1/4 of an inch off. This side would be about 5 or 6 millimeters worth. Test it out. Okay, it's good on the base. We need just a pinch more taken off here in this upper half. Right there. All right. Say that'd be about it. Yep. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and bind our handle area really well. I like to make sure that I cover any possibilities of lumps that have developed from the braiding starting. But with chrome splits, you find that a lot of that comes out during the rolling process anyways. Because this stuff just does not behave the way that leather that still has the skin side of the dermis still attached. It's like a whole different monster. Again, it just compresses down so much. I can't even, words just don't express it. And that magic happens so well when the overlay comes, because the overlay bites in so much into this stuff, and you get such a solid, tight braid. Remember, it's okay with a very mild gap is okay. You don't want big gaps. Big gaps create flat spots, braid. Even though this stuff smashes down pretty well, I'd say that I have a hard time believing that even if I did leave a pretty big gap, I have a hard time believing that it would be very noticeable with chrome splits anyways. So we might have a little bit of a gap towards the very base of the handle. Not much. That's perfect. We'll wrap that handle base several times. And we'll give it a good tug. We don't want that going anywhere. Now we're going to come back. Applying a little bit more pressure this pass. We don't need to make a ton more passes, because reality is as soon as we're done rolling this, we're going to cut out a bolster, tie it right over top, and we're going to put a bunch more binding right there on that handle. So that's that. We bound our broken strand area to even out the tension a little bit. Now it is a little bit tighter here, right, than it is here, but remember, I'm going to go roll all this, and then we're going to bind the holy moly, because this is actually the section that we want the tightest amount of binding in. So it's going to blend that in all very well, and again, like I said, you won't even know that this break even happened had it not happened on camera. So yeah, that's good. I'm going to take this up, roll it, and come back to you guys when it's all done. Alrighty, here we are. We have the belly nice and rolled. Again, you can see how much that mushed down quite a bit. So you can see how well this stuff compresses down and everything. And once we get into braiding that overlay, man, it's going to be real nice. So next thing is we're going to put this back in the vise, and we want to apply our stiffening binding. So that way the customer gets what he wants with stiffer transition. As you can see here, very mild difference in tension here versus here. But as I said, because we're binding this area here and going to make sure that that's good and strong, it's not going to make any difference. So we're going to go ahead and bind that up. Now, the first 3 to 4 inches or so of this binding, I'm going to bind, keep the gaps. Matter of fact, let me bring you guys in a little closer here so you can see what we're doing. So you can see this first 3 to 4 inches. I'd say from here to here is about 6 inches, maybe 5, 5.5, 5 inches, something like that. So we're going to do the first 3 or 4 inches real close. About like that. Now we're going to start opening it up a little bit more, still applying the same amount of tension. We're going to carry over the section that we did where we broke the strand. Pass. Now we're going to work our way back up, starting out wide. Making big crisscrosses. Now we're going to start tightening it up. To make smaller lines crisscross across our first section of smaller lines. Just like that. And see. I think that's good. I think when we tie on the bolster, we'll do a final layer. Yeah, I think that's good for now. I think when we tie on the bolster, we'll do the final layer. Again, remember, like I said, the customer's not 100% looking for a Jacka, but he does want it reinforced and he does want it slightly stiffer. And this isn't super stiff, it's got plenty of play in it. I would say that if I left it 100% as is, this would, after the whip breaks in well, and the kangaroo, after the kangaroo loosens up quite a bit, I would say that it would become kind of like a normal transition, but we want it just a bit tighter. And so what I might do is I might come back with some cotton twine and fully cover maybe from here to about here, fully cover in my cotton twine, just to really, one, that'll beefen up the swell a little bit more after applying the bolster, and two, it will also serve to give us that mild rigidity of what we want. But I think I don't know. I might not do the cotton. We'll see. We'll see. But so now, the last thing that I have to do is, with this particular belly, is take it over there to my table, take measurement of it, and cut the remaining lace, cut the total length out to 9 feet, put it back in the vise, or actually put it on the hook really, and taper off those strands to a real fine point. And that's it. So I will come back to you guys. The next, well, no, you know what? I'm going to cut the bolster out too. You guys already saw me cut the cores, so that's pretty much how I cut the bolsters. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'll lay it out on a good sheet of chrome split, take my measurements, cut it out, and get it trimmed and ready to be applied on. Then we'll come back on camera, grease this all on. I'll show you guys how I tie on my bolsters before moving into prepping up our strands that we have already cut. All right? Okay. So, after careful deliberation, as I was examining this whip in its current state and size, kind of made an executive decision to say, I don't think I'm going to add a bolster. And I'll tell you why. So, when I cut the bolster, when I measured up the bolster and wrapped it around and marked it and everything, and then when I cut it out, I kind of wrapped it around, and I just kind of thought, you know, at its current size, by the time I put a bolster over it, of course unsplit, by the time that I do that, and then turn around and braid an overlay, and even though I'm going to split that overlay, I'm not going to split a ton off of it. I'm just going to clean it up real good. I just feel at that point in time the whip will be a little too thick than what the customer wants, which I don't think it would be overly too thick, but it would be mildly too thick. And I already had an incident once where I had a hard time getting this whip's going to have a ferrule on it, a ferrule collar, and a couple of knots locking that in. And I already had a whip that I did not too long ago that it was so thick it was just a hair over, and it was so hard to get that ferrule in place. And I was just like, yeah, I don't want to do that. Yeah. And so see, right now at the transition, we're at 20.779 millimeters. So you take another, what, 1.2 millimeters, which is probably around what that chrome split's at, bolster, tied on, and then you take, 1 millimeter thick, just estimation, 1 millimeter thick, so so you add that 1.3 millimeters of bolster on either side. That's going to be 23 millimeters right there. And then when you have, millimeter lace overlay going over top of it, you're going to be 26 to 27 millimeters. It's just going to be pretty beef. That's a beefier whip, and that's not what the customer wants. And my ferrules only come in 25 millimeters, so we're not going to do that. So yeah, with that being said, that's kind of the decision that I've made. So with that decision being made, I've decided that I'm going to go ahead and tighten up this binding a little bit more, and reinforce it a little bit more. Since we're not adding that bolster on, I want to make sure I get the binding tight enough. But that's the thing with whip making. This is why. Now you can, if you want to, by all means, if you just want to make whips and you want to make the same type, the same style, same design, same construction, and just kind of call it a day and let it be what it is. And that's kind of the thing. When I first started making whips, or was first processing everything in regards to making whips, I told myself, I said, self, we're not going to do custom whips. We're just going to learn to make whips. We're going to make whips the way that we want to make whips, and we're not going to change anything about the way that we want to make whips. And that's all that we're going to write about the situation. But over time, with help of great mentors, Casey Tyler and Bernardo Del Carpio and Blake Gorey, a lot of these guys that I talked a lot with Adam Winrich. You know, when you get into really thinking about it, and you start realizing that so many different styles and builds of whips have so many different methods and types of construction, and I really started getting challenged by these guys in terms of, you know, like, it's important to step out of your comfort zone. It's important to try something new, try something different. And what I found when dealing with customers, and dealing with whip makers in the realm of customers and collectors, at the end of the day, no matter what I think, the customer is the one who wants the whip. They're the ones who have a idea or a dream in their mind, and you know, they might request different things, and that's just a real thing. You're going to deal with that. You're going to deal with different customers that request different types of or styles of designs, and some are going to be slimmer, and some are going to be thicker, and some are going to be fatter and lighter and beefier and heavier and everything in between. And you know, so if you sell yourself short to say, well, I'm not going to do that, I'm just going to make whips the way that I want to make whips, and trust me, I'm not slamming any person who has that mentality. That's not my intent in this video, is to slam you for saying, well, you're not a good enough whip maker because you only want to make whips the way that you want to make whips. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, there is a market of people out there who want specific designs and specific types, and different sizes and so forth. And so I think it's kind of important to branch out and learn how to, you know, build a good quality whip, no matter the size, no matter the type or style of material that you're using, no matter how heavy or how light, how long or how short, or how fat or how skinny, it's going to be a good quality whip. I just think at the end of the day that just helps you out in terms of your client base, because not every customer is the same. Some customers are it's just what we'll call them. They're noobs. They don't really know anything about the craft. They don't really know what they're looking for entirely. And a lot of times they might be looking to you for that inspiration of what they should get. And but then there's other guys, or you know, in that noob category, some guys who they don't care what they get. They just want a good whip. You know, if it's a whip that looks the part, cracks good and cracks well, they call it a day. They're happy and they're excited over it. But then there's guys who go ahead and grease this down while we're talking. Then there's guys who honestly, they know everything about what they want, and they have it down to a T. Some guys, I've had guys send me exact measurements to try to match. Earlier this year, I was gifted with the opportunity and a challenge by Adam Winrich to copy a Terry Jacka Catwoman whip, which, you know, I'd never really had one of those. So he sent me one, and he's like, "Copy this." And man, what a great opportunity and challenge that was, to challenge myself to not only copy the type of design, but to also copy copy the style and the look through and through, all the way through. We never let our braiding soap go to waste. I've always got little itty bitty mini side projects laying around here. So when I got a whole handful of braiding soap, I just lather it on another core that I've got laying around, because I'm usually working on 2 or 3 projects at once. If I'm not working on a couple of customer whips, I'm working on an experiment of some sort. Again, just to better myself. For instance, kipskin. This is all kipskin here. Kipskin belly, kipskin core, kipskin bolster. I've got kipskin overlay and knots over there. I can't wait to have that one done. I was inspired by one of my mentors, Bernardo Del Carpio, when I saw a previous customer who owns one of his kipskin whips. Saw him post a picture of it. I was like, man, that looks really good. I want to make one. So yeah. Anyways, so yeah, those are my thoughts with that. So now we're going to transition to trimming up the strands of our overlay. Since we already have those cut out, that's going to soak up that grease wool well and get good and packed full of grease and oil and everything. And so as that's soaking in, we'll go ahead and trim this up and get prepared to start braiding our overlay. Alright, so now it's time for us to get to our overlay. You might think that I'm a magical person, that I was able to just turn those brandy strands into black. Yes, sirree, I am. I have been bestowed such wonderful gifts and powers. Such gifts and powers to make mistakes and cut out an overlay from brandy. And as I'm working through this video, I've also been sharing it with the customer just so that he can see the different parts that I'm uploading to Facebook, or I'm sorry, YouTube. And I sent him the video where I cut out this overlay, and he's like, hey man, yeah, it's real awesome, I love it, I love being able to see the process. The only thing though is that I wanted black. So, hey, you know what? I mean, things like that happen. It's easy. Don't get discouraged. The reality is that brandy over there will serve for a great 9-foot overlay, or an 8-foot overlay, or a 6-foot overlay. So it's not going to go to waste. Some of it will, but it's not entirely going to go to waste. So first thing that I want to do here, as we get ready to prep these strands, is I want to get my splitter set at the right width, and we're going to use these knot strands that I cut out. Now nothing's been trimmed yet. I'm going to split first, trim after. You don't have to do it that way, but that's the way that I'm going to do it. We're going to start with our splitter up a little high, and might be better for you guys, now that I think about it, it'd be better for you guys to come over here so you can see all the magic happening here. Yes. So we're going to start with the splitter high and trim a little off here and see how it turns out. And once we get it to where I'm comfortable with, where I want it to be, we'll stick with it. So we're not grabbing anything there, so we got to drop down a little bit here. Try that. I'm not going to take off a ton. I am going to take off a little bit. Still not dropping off there. It's always good to just run a couple of test pieces. Still not much off there. Here we go. Now we're pulling off. I think that's pretty good. Let's see here, if you guys can see this. Focus. It's always got to do that. You see here, there's the difference, right? That's the difference. This is unsplit, and this is what's split. You can see here how much that is. I think that that's good. So go ahead and just roll this up, get it out the way. I'm gonna tighten down my splitter. Now we're just going to do one strand at a time. I'm not gonna videotape this whole process. I'm only gonna do a little bit of it for you guys. Because again, it's like braiding. It's like watching paint dry. There's no sense of you guys being there for this. So I go through with each strand, put it through backwards. Be mindful of twists. Twists can happen, so you want to be mindful of those. Don't want to lop any strands in half. Great. Let's start this process. So we get down to the skinny parts here. Slow down to make sure that we don't get any twists. Yeah, that's good. One down. And I'll do one more for you guys. This splitter is a Tandy leather splitter. Very good. Very sharp. Gets the job done very well. Good. Okay. So yeah, from here, I'm gonna cut the camera. I want to show you one more thing though, before I do. Show you one more thing real quick, just so you guys can see. So the way that I typically stretch my strands, I don't really prefer to do around the hook method or anything. And I don't even wet my strands to stretch them. I just grab them in my hand just like this and pull along the length. I saw somebody in a video do this one time, and I think the reason why I've come to really like it is you can feel the strands in your hands. You can feel if the leather is beginning to tear. I find that with the wetting them down and going around the hook real heavy, I find that at times that can cause you to break strands more frequently. So that's kind of the method that I've developed. I know some guys swear by wetting strands, and that's okay. I have done it in the past many times, but over the last year, I would say that I've kind of moved away from wetting down my strands to stretch them, and I just dry stretch them, and I don't dry stretch them around a hook, because I want to be able to feel, like I said, I've broken strands pulling like that. You can feel it begin to tear, and it's a good indication that you should stop pulling. Whereas if you just did them around a hook, it'll snap on you, and then you've got an overlay with a strand that you have to splice back in somewhere. So my personal preference is to not do that and not create that problem for myself. So yeah, I'm going to do the rest of this off camera, and then when I come back to you guys, we will be getting ready to go ahead and trim these strands and bevel them. We're gonna bevel both undersides. We're not gonna bevel any of the top sides. We're gonna bevel both under, and we're just gonna take a small amount off. We're not gonna take a huge amount off because we are splitting these strands a little bit, and with chrome split and everything, once you roll it and mush it down real good, everything just becomes so smooth. So yeah, come back to you guys when we're on the hook and ready to trim. All right, guys. Now we're going to get ready here to trim our strands. I already took the liberty. Normally what I do is I take the halfway length and the halfway length of the entire length of the strand, and I do all the last halves in the final taper stage, which for this particular whip I'm choosing to do 3.5 millimeters. And the reason why is that it's going to be, we're going to end in an 8-plat tip, not a 6-plat tip. And so I want the strands to be slightly thinner for me to facilitate that. Now, but I also wanted to be able to focus on showing you guys a little bit more up close how these particular guides that I use work, so that you can see them, and it's easier to do that up here. Closer to the yoke, where I can set the camera up nice and close and still be out of the way, versus having to walk backwards, 6, 7, 8, 9 feet, cutting one length, because that's what the final taper is. So with that, let me introduce you into these particular guides here. These are the guides that I use. As you can see here, they're just these little pegs. You can see there's a notch here. That notch is actually where your blade goes. And the way that you hold it, for instance, we're going to use the 8 millimeter one here. And you can see here we've got 2.5 millimeters, 3.5 millimeters, 4.5, 5.5, 6, 6.5, 7.5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And I have everything else in between, and everything else as low, as far down as like 0.25. But these are the ones that I use. I tend to go for the 0.5s for some reason. I think that's because typically on an indie whip, I end with a 4.5, and I feel that 3.5 is a little bit better than 3, just taste. So, but yeah, so I'll show you kind of how this guide works here a little bit. So let's say I have this strand here, right? Clean this little area off. So Hang on, let me brush that real quick so you guys can see well. Okay, so we have our guide, right? This is the 8mm, so you would hold it like this, and the strand is going to lay right in there just like that, right? And your thumb is just going to press up against it just to hold it in place, right? And then you would take your blade and you would fit it right into that groove, just like that there. And then you grab a hold of the strand and you just walk backwards and it cuts it all out. And that's pretty much how these little guides work here. You can see, nice and close. Again, you take the knife, place it right in there. Strand goes in this area here, hold it for tension, and then you just walk backwards. Now these guides, the STL file, which is the 3D printing file that is needed to print these, is actually free. There's a guy, I can't remember his name, I think his first name is Josh. He's the one that designed these, and he put that file up for free. In fact, if you go to, you can just search up like leather lace cutting pegs or resizing pegs or something like that, or you can go right to stlfinder.com and type that in a search, and just search through the pictures until you find these ones. I think they're normally in like blue and red. And then all I did was I took that file and I found a custom 3D printer person on Etsy, and actually it was a really good deal. I had him print out 2 whole sets for $100, and they were, I think he was going to do $60 for a single, and absolutely 100% worth it. You can also make these on your own if you wanted to just, basically take some wood. I mean, you can really do the same thing with some wood if you happen to be a little bit of a carpenter or a whittler or something. And the key is to just make sure that you pre-measure the distance between this groove and this fence here, so that way it's taken care of, and you can make up a set. And I mean, shoot, if there's some tool and die makers out there, I'm sure you could find somebody to make you some metal ones and so forth. So these are the guides that I use. But anyways, we're gonna get started here trimming on some of these. So we're going to do, I think 8mm is good. Now we actually started the taper to the final taper of 3.5. We actually started a little bit earlier than the halfway point. That's okay though, because this is, like I said, this is like a Jacka style type whip. And Jacka's methods for braiding was that he would typically use thinner strands, and then he would kind of make a wider braiding angle when he braided. So we're going to do the same thing. The difference is that I do want to start out towards the handle. I want to start out a little bit thicker, or a little bit wider, I should say. I want to start out a little bit wider and carry that width out just a hair longer before tapering down. So it'll stay wider for a longer portion of the whip than what I would normally do, but then when it begins to taper, it'll taper down quicker until eventually getting down to that 3.5mm taper. Let me see how this looks, if you guys can see that well. I think so, yeah. So yep, you just set it in there, and then I usually take a peek behind to make sure I get my blade in that groove well. There she is right there. And we're just gonna pull it straight out, and I'm gonna walk all the way down as far as this will take me. So now I'm off camera, you guys won't see that. All right. And we'll do the next one. And we'll do all 12 strands. Now you don't have to use these type of guides. You don't have to use anything like this to size down your strands. You can do it all by freehand. You can simply just take a measurement and cut, and just try to match it as best as you can all the way through. One of my mentors, Bernardo Del Carpio, he made mention, I know, and one of my other ones, Casey Tyler, they both do it freehand, but Bernardo made a comment that was I thought pretty well spot on in terms of that, you know, like on whether or not you should use guides or shouldn't, or not really that you should or shouldn't, but he said, you know, at the end of the day, when you take into account of the amount of stretch that goes on with kangaroo, and how some strands are going to stretch a little bit more than others and some spots a little bit more than others, he said, you know, you kind of always have a little bit of inconsistency. So you're always just kind of going to have some inconsistency. It's not going to be 100% perfect through and through. So what's the difference between, you know, just kind of hand trimming things versus you know, using the guides? And I thought that was very valid. You know, even though I still choose to use the guides, it was a valid point, and definitely worth considering when you think about it. I like the consistency of it, the consistency factor. I've cut plenty of bellies and overlays from the hide freehand. I've done several overlays trimmed freehand. Matter of fact, I had not too long ago my first original set of pegs. I kind of over time lost a few, and then actually it was my 8mm one broke right here, broke right there where that gouge is, and or that notch, and I was like, oh no, and it forced me for a couple of whips to have to do it, and I did good. I mean, I'm not going to harp on myself over it. There was a couple of small inconsistencies, but nothing that I would say is more than, you know, any type of inconsistencies that I could get from this. But it did take me a lot longer. I will say that. It took me a lot longer, and especially the cutting from the hide portion takes me a lot longer to do versus using my stranders. So this is kind of the method that I've adapted for myself. I know that Peter Thorndike, I believe, I could be wrong on that, I believe Peter Thorndike uses guides like these. I know for certain that Chris Barr uses guides like these because I've seen him use them. So yeah, I mean, I think that they're good. I think they're good to use, and worth trying out if you're a little bit more of a mild perfectionist when it comes to that. So yeah, we did all of our strands. All of our strands are now cut to 8mm uniformly, and this is a 10-inch handle. So I'm gonna say probably, I bet you, about 14 inches, yeah, maybe 15 inches, probably about right there is when I need to make the change, and we're gonna drop down to 7.5. So now what I'll do is I'll do one strand here with you guys on camera with me. You guys can follow me as I do this one strand, and then the rest I'm going to do off camera, so you guys don't have to worry about going through that, because it can be a process. So I'm feeling about right there for a 10-inch handle. It's about the amount of space that we need. So we're going to come to this point, and we're going to take 7.5mm, and we're going to start cutting that down straight through. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back down to the beginning where we were, where I started with the 3.5. About right here. This is the 3.5 section, and you can see here there's a taper that happens. If it'll focus, there's a taper that kind of happens there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go up. I'm going to go up about a foot, and I'm going to taper from there 4.5 millimeters. So this is where we are now, 4.5. Now I'm going to grab the 5.5. I'm going to go up about a foot. And I'm just eyeballing it. We're going to cut in 5.5. And then we're going to grab 6.5. We're going to go up about a foot. I'll bring you guys up here a little bit. 6.5. We're going to go up about a foot. And make our cut. Try it again here, just to make sure. Yep, that's it. So that would be our lace. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to match the rest of these to this. I would say doing this method and how I do it, it should only take me about a half hour to maybe do these. Now the key here, I really don't think I need to bevel a whole lot, but I'm going to bevel. There's just not much that needs to come off. So, but I do want to show you guys how I approach beveling and how I do it. Now, you may remember we made mention of how I like to use this blade because it's got that metal guard there. So we're going to do both undersides. Again, these strands aren't ridiculously thick, but we do want to get it good. So I usually only open up about that much on my blade, and just going to switch it over here, and I'm going to pinch it. I like to pinch the strand in between these two fingers and grab a hold of it like that. Now, what I like to do is I kind of find a position where this finger, this thumb, this finger, and this thumb all kind of lock together, right? So the way that I do that is when I have the blade, right? Blade is out. You see here, I take this finger and I place it behind this finger. And then I kind of get it in there, get it lined up, and I butt these two thumbs up against each other. Just about like that right there. And that's my position. And now I'm just going to take just a hair off that corner. I don't even know if you guys can see that. And so right now my fingers and hands are all locked together. Nothing is going to move. So all I have to do is loosen the amount of tension that I'm squeezing with my left thumb and finger, which is what's creating the drag. But I don't go too fast. I like to go nice and slow. If you get going a little too fast, sometimes you can gouge things. Of course, we don't want that on this whip. You can't really see what I'm doing right now because I'm a little too far past you guys, but that's okay. When I get down to the thinner sections, I don't really bother with braiding or with beveling. So you can see here, you can see that nice bevel that we got, that nice shiny line. That's the bevel that we got there. Now, if I was doing an indie whip, the way that I do my guides, it's kind of something that I had developed with my guides. Plus, I don't split any of the overlay strands on my indie whips. But instead, because typically with an indie whip you do one bottom, one top, opposite corners, right? For beveling. If I was doing an indie whip, then to bevel the top corner, I would bevel this corner, and the way that I do that is I don't even bevel it. All I do is when I cut with this guide, you see here when I set my blade in, instead of cutting it straight like I did, I actually angle it, just like that. And you can see it puts that angle, that bevel, right in as soon as I cut. So then I only have to bevel one side. I don't even have to worry about it from there on out. And I prefer to do that. But this is not an indie whip, so we want to bevel both undersides here. Now, with this side can be the trickier one, right? Like David Morgan has a video out where it shows him beveling, and he bevels this side like this, like we just did, and then he flips it and does the other side and does the same thing as we just did, right? And so that's how he does that, because it is kind of known that this edge can be slightly the difficult edge, unless you're super gifted and you want to go for it with the opposite hand. But for me, it's the same thing. Again, same reason why I really like this knife. Now with the position on this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come behind. See how I brought this blade behind, and I rested that guard right on my finger, right? And I'm going to get in there, and same thing, this finger's behind, and I'm kind of locking this finger down underneath, and I'm finding that edge that I want to start cutting. Now I'm taking this thumb and I'm pressing it up against this finger to kind of lock everything in. And once I get my cut started, about like that right there. There we go. Now we're taking some material off. And it's the exact same concept. Now my hands are locked together. Everything's locked in place. So all I have to do is walk backwards. And as long as I don't adjust the angle on my knife, I shouldn't have any issues where I gouge in or cut the strand in half or anything like that, which, I mean, at the end of the day, that can happen if you get ahead of yourself. That's why it's always important to just be patient, take your time, so forth. So now you can see, I don't know if you can see that, but we've gotten this edge now too. So now we have both sides done on the underside. So when we braid all of these together, it's going to turn out real nice. So that's the method that I use for trimming my strands. Now, normally using the guides, so when we did this first strand and I walked you guys through that, right? Normally I would, at each increment, so when we started at the 3 millimeters or 3.5 millimeters, I go and do every strand in 3.5 millimeters, right? And then when I go up to the 4.5 millimeter, I do every strand to the 4.5 millimeter. And when I go up to the 5.5, I do every strand in the 5.5. And when I go up to the 6.5, I do every strand in the 6.5. And that's what typically works best with me. And like I said, in about 20 minutes, half hour, see this here? Got that started to tear there. That started to tear there a little bit. So when I go to braid this, I have to be mindful of that because that'll snap right off, which isn't an issue. If you ever have a strand snap off of a yoke, to be honest, it's real simple. You can just take a dab of super glue, glue it right back onto the yoke. You wouldn't even know it's there, because all that's going to be cut off, and it's all going to be underneath of the heel knot anyways. It doesn't matter. Doesn't jeopardize the integrity of anything whatsoever. So yeah, I'm gonna do the rest of these off camera, and when we come back, it will be time for us to start the braid. Here's our core. Looks like that braiding soap has soaking in real well. some of that waxy residue still left over. We will grease this down one more time when we put it in the vise, and or actually when we'll start the braid on this, then we'll insert the core and handle, and I'll cut this tag off so that it's flush. We'll grease the handle down, and then once we have this started, we'll insert that handle in, tighten up the braid, begin braiding, and good to go. I might do something a little, I was kind of starting to feel a groove for maybe doing like a short herringbone. Doing an under 2, let me see. Maybe doing an under 2 over 2. I don't know if you can do that in 12. 6. Under 2 over 2, under 1. Now, maybe, we'll see. We'll see. I don't know, probably not, because it's not a 16 plat. But that's okay. If not, we'll just do a diamond. So yeah, I'll come back to you guys when it's time to braid. All right, we have finally come to the fun part. To the fun part. So, we're gonna get ready to start braiding on this overlay. First thing that I like to do is I like to put my yoke, the strands right in the vise, tighten down real good, and then get some braiding soap. Get everything nice and lathered up for like the first foot or so. Okay, so now got it there. The way that we're going to start this, so we're first going to start by crossing 2, and then I'm going to take the next one. So this one went under, this one's going to go over. I'm going to go over to the other side. We're going to go under, over, and I'm going to go to the other side, grab the next strand. We're going to go under, over, next strand from the other side, over, under, over, and from the right again, over, under, over. Now back to the left, under, over, and then back to the right, under, over, and then one last one on the left, over, under, over. I'm gonna kind of pull out so I have some slack here. Now we're going to take these back ones. We're also going to crisscross the back ones, right? So this is our standing end right here. This is where we left off. So we're going to go and we're going to grab the left side, and it's going to go under this right side one here, right? You see that? It's going to go under that one, and then it's going to go over, under, over. And now I'm going to grab this one. It's going to go under, over, under, over. Now we have officially fully closed everything in. I'm going to do 2 more passes. So now this is going to go under, over, under, over. And the next one's going to go here. It's going to go under this one, over, under, over. One more on either side. Now this is our working strand. This is the strand we're going to work. So we're going to come over here on this side. It's going to go under this strand, so we're going to reach under it. And we're going to go over, under, over. And then the last one, same thing. We're going to go under this strand, reach over on this side, grab this strand, and we're going to go over, under. Pull my slack out again. All right, so now we have officially started our braid where it needs to be. Hang that side up there. We're going to go ahead and take our handle of whip core, give that a little mild greasing again. Now we're basically going to take this, we're going to insert that right in, just like that. And we're going to kind of push everything up, think like a Chinese finger trap. Now we're just going to slowly start tightening everything up around it. I'm going to continue to work either side, back and forth on either side until everything tightens up. Continuing to keep pressure with my thumb pushing upward. Just continuing to pull all the slack out from either side. Probably about as much as we'll get out, like that. So now we need to make another pass here. So this is our standing end. This is where we left off. So we're going to work this end. So the way that I braid is I like to place my hand underneath, come over on this side, and I use this finger to, you'll see it when I get to this side, to kind of organize the strands where they're supposed to go using my hand. Then I reach underneath, grab and pull. You'll see it on the other side when we get to it. Grab and pull. So now you'll see a lot better. This is the strand we're going to work, so I'm going to go underneath. So if you notice here, I'm going to take this finger, we're going to go under this one, over this one, under this one, over this one, under this one, and over this one. So my finger is officially under all these three that we're going under and over top of all the three that we're going over. Then I reach underneath the three and I pull the strand through. I pull it tight, lay it in place. And I do that on either side until we get it all locked in good. Same thing, under, over, under, over, under, over. Grab a hold. Pull good and tight. Same thing. See it better on this side. See if I can give you guys an even better view there. Yeah. This side. Going under, over, under, over, under, over. Same thing. Under, over, under, over, under, over. Grab it, pull it. Same thing. Under, over, under, over, under, over. Now it's all start tighten down real well. That's what we want. Want our braid to be good and tight. Key here is to just try to make sure we keep everything as centered as possible. Trust me, there's a, what we call it barber polling. when our seam starts to kind of get off a little bit. Twist, you get a little bit of twisting in the handle. It can happen. Mild twists aren't really as noticeable, and also not really that big of a deal. Serious twists, though, definitely be noticeable. Again, it's not going to degrade the effectiveness of your whip at all. It's not going to affect that whatsoever. It's clearly just an appearance flaw. Some guys are a lot bigger stiflers on appearance flaws than others. Some customers might not care if you have mild appearance flaws. Some of them do. It's best to always work on them, though. Casey Tyler, one of my mentors, was always adamant in repeating that to me consistently all the time. Like, you should be growing constantly. You never want to get to a rut where you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again. You never want to get to a place where you're doing the same thing and just kind of thinking like, this is the only way. So some of the best whip makers were able to do all sorts of different things. And you want each whip to be a little different and change a little bit and get a little bit better here and a little bit better there. Casey has always been very good with teaching me that. Also holding me accountable to it as well, you know. As one thing with Casey is that he kind of took a tough love approach where he was not afraid to tell me, hey man, you need to work on this, and I'm thankful for that. Super grateful and thankful that he was like that with me, because I personally feel that's one of the major things that helped me grow so much quicker than I probably would have if I didn't have that. When you got somebody who's telling you like, hey man, you know, and he wasn't short of his compliments either. He always complimented me on my work. I do find though, when working with a mentor like Casey, I find that as I took some of the criticism, the corrective criticism, good criticism, not bad, but as I took some of the criticism and took it to heart and worked on those things, I found that as time went on, he had a lot less negative things to say about my whips. Till nowadays, not to say that my whips are perfect, because I know they're not, but nowadays, Casey hardly ever says anything to me other than, man, that's good, I like it, like the color, great job. So that's good. It means that I've grown, and I owe people like him, I owe people like Bernardo Del Carpio, Blake Gorey. Blake Gorey was one of the first people that helped me along the way. And he's a really super cool dude, man. If you guys are ever trying to get started, reach out to Blake. He's super eager to help people out. He's full of knowledge. There's a lot of great people out there. So my kids are coming down here to visit me. They've got their own little workshop over there. So, yeah. Hey guys, you guys go back upstairs. Transitioning here, let me move you guys back. I'll be transitioning here to our herringbone soon. Still following the same pattern right now. I'll be transitioning to that in a moment. Our diamonds look pretty straight. I'm sure there's some slight twist in there a little bit, but that's okay. From here they look pretty good. Pretty happy with that. I think the customer will be happy with that too. Yeah, I think it was a good idea. Good. It was a good call. Not tooting my horn, but it was a good call on my part to not do that bolster. I'm looking at this width right now and I'm thinking this is perfect. I know he is going to be happy with this. And that's that. So I think I'm going to take a measurement real quick. Leave that there. Take a quick measurement. Because this whip is a 10-inch handled whip, but we're also adding a ferrule and 2 knots. So take a look here. See exactly where our braid is at. Almost there. I think I'm going to take us up to the 8-inch mark. Just a couple more passes, and then we're going to transition. Well, matter of fact, no, hold it. Yeah, we're there. Okay. The back needs to catch up. So we're going to transition to a herringbone. It's pointless for us to do all the work for doing a diamond plait when this is going to be covered with ferrules and knots, to be honest. Not to mention a diamond plait kind of fills out a little bit more space, whereas a herringbone is going to be mildly slimmer. And we want to make sure we have enough clearance for that ferrule to clear. So we're just really going to catch up this back half. So to transition in a 12 plait, to transition from a diamond plait to a herringbone, it's real simple. We're going to, with the first 3 strands, we're going to follow the same diamond plait pattern. We're going to go under 1, over 1, under 1, and then we're going to go over the last 3, transitioning the front end to a herringbone. Just like that, right? We're going to do the same thing. We're going to actually do this for 2 passes, under 1, over 1. We're going to do 3 passes, under 1, over 1, under 1, and then over 3, under 1, over 1, under 1, over 3. Do it again, same thing, under 1, over 1, under 1, over 3. Same thing, under 1, over 1, under 1, over 3. This is the last pass on that side that we're doing. Under 1, over 1, under 1, over 3. No, it's not the last pass. This is the last pass. It's the last pass on the left. And then now we're going to do the last pass on the right. Under 1, over 1, under 1, over 3. Now, we're fully set up to transition to a full-blown herringbone. To this point, it's just going to be under 3, over 3. Just like that. How you guys see that well? Yeah. Under 3, over 3. Under 3, over 3. So you can see here when I do my herringbone, we'll do it again when I'm on the left side. I've seen Adam Winrich braids this way. I believe Bernardo Del Carpio kind of braids this way. This is kind of reminiscent of how David Morgan would braid. So it's the same thing. I kind of reach underneath and I lock this crisscross in with my thumb, then I reach underneath, same thing, use this finger, under 3, over 3, I lay those down flat, and I lay that down, then I reach underneath, grab, and then pull. There's lots of different ways to braid. You can braid. There are some guys who will do like this right here. They will pull first and then reach into 3, lay it over just like that. I can't say that one way is more right or wrong than the other way. I think it's whatever you're most comfortable with. This was kind of how I started when I started in nylon. So the beginning of this whip is going to have fatter strands, kind of like a Morgan, but the taper is going to progress on the strands. The taper is going to progress much quicker. By the time we get down to this lower half, this last half of the strands, we're going to be in thinner strands. And so I like this concept because I feel that it adds quite a bit of rigidity, extra rigidity to this portion to the transition area of the whip, and loosens up the last half of the whip. Very good, very good. And it keeps the last half of the whip a little bit more supple, and I like that. I think we'll do a couple more passes and we'll probably call it from here. I'm not going to do any video within this series, this whip build, on strand drops. There's a lot of great videos out there for strand drops. So I was trying to be more informational on approaching whip making in different ways, different types and styles of builds, and so forth. That's what I was trying to be more geared towards with these videos. So yeah, again, it's kind of like watching paint dry. That's what that's what Bernie used to say. I used to watch Bernie's videos. It's like watching paint dry, me braiding here. So I'm going to cut the video here, and I'll keep braiding this off screen. This will take me a little while to do it. I could blaze through it real quickly, but you know, I'm raising babies and doing all that crazy stuff too. So I'll get this done over the next couple of days, and in between the different projects and different things I got going on, and kids and stuff, and then we'll come back with the knots. I'll show you guys how I build up. This whip will not have a weighted butt end. It's not going to have weight back here. So we might do one wrap of lead, but not much. And then we're going to do leather wraps here to build our foundation for this knot. These knots will use leather as well. And then, of course, we've got that ferrule. And I think we're pretty good. Where's my calipers at? I think we're pretty good here. Now, granted, this hasn't been rolled yet, but I bet you this is somewhere around 24, 25. 25.7, yeah. And when this rolls, this will roll down probably closer to 24 when I roll this down. So it'll be real good. Ferrule will probably be right in here, right before that swell. Somewhere around there, with a small knot on this side and a small knot on this side. So yeah, it'd be a fun little thing. So I'll let you guys go, and I'll come back to you when I get the braiding done, when it's time for us to install the fall. I'll probably show you guys my method for cutting the fall as well. This particular whip, I'll probably dye the fall. I typically only stick with alum tan, and when we get to that, I'll show you what that is. I've just had bad luck with every other material that I've used. I don't care if it's red hide, I don't care if it's white hide. In my experience, that stuff is just junk. It falls apart, it breaks, and alum tan has so far been the strongest and best material that I've used so far. So I'm going to stick with that, but I like to dye it to match colors if I can. So since this is a black whip, we're going to go with black fall. And yeah, it'll be a fun time. So yep, I'll come back to you guys when it's time to do that.